time, just a number of years ago, when I used to think a lot of things was funny, and I had the ability to stand in front of crowds and make people laugh, so I became a comedian. And as the years went on, many things didn't strike me as being so funny. Almost equal number of things. Some was sad, some was tragedy, some was unacceptable to me, so I started talking about those things in front of audiences, and I found that I got fewer laughs, but I slept better at night. And when the percentage of things struck me as being less funny than the things that I really cared about and was concerned about, I decided to direct some of my action into helping alleviate some of the injustices in the world. It cost me dearly in the world that I made my career, but in the world I lived in, I was well rewarded. There are homeless people tonight roaming around the back streets of our country. Now they're sleeping in alleys and facing the cold and hunger and attack, and most devastating, they've lost hope. Most of these people, through no choice of their own, are in these conditions, and they are good people, anxious to get back into the mainstream of society and carry their share of the load. No one is asking you to give up your career. No one is asking you to give up your leisure time. All we're asking you to do is to feel some compassion for your fellow men and women and children. And all we're asking you to do is just go to the telephone and pick it up and call. And I thank you. May God bless you.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. This is Preacher Moss, host of the SOS and ShOUT show. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I can be heard. Sultana, can you let me know if you can hear me? Am I coming through clear? We're trying a microphone on a new computer here, so I just want to make sure we're okay. Reed, let me know if we're coming through clear. I'll wait for you, but I'm gonna keep on keeping on, as we say. So, like I said, I'm the host of the SOS. My name is Preacher Moss. For anybody that's coming on the show for the first time, we appreciate you. We thank you for your time, spending this time with us. We're only here about 25 to 30 minutes each day. I'm proud to say we are a daily show. We've been going 7 days a week since April the 24th, 2020, and we hope to make it to Ramadan this year and keep the train going. That's a little side note. The other thing I want to do is I just want to make sure that I center this conversation. I showed a very particular video, a specific video of my my comedy dad, if you will. Not my real dad, but my comedy dad. And I say Dick Gregory is my comedy dad because what you just saw from Dick Gregory speaking is where I was and where I am as a comedian right now. Whereby, of course, my job as a comedian to make people laugh. Make you laugh, make you chuckle, tell amusing stories, and give you hilarious narratives. But there does come a time, brothers and sisters, where sometimes the things that you see are overwhelming. The things that you see have greater merit than the idea of the laugh or the cheap chuckle. And I have to share that with you as my audience, as my brothers and sisters, because I think people need to know that. The advent of Muslim comedians to the Muslim community was late, and it was nuanced, and it was a novelty. But the real aspect for me as a Muslim comedian, it does not conflate the idea that even with comedy, I still consider myself doing religious work. I use my comedy to do religious work. Whatever that is, I think that can make Allah happy or please Him or serve in His creation. That's what I do. And I came across this video of Dick Gregory at 1986. Brothers and sisters, I don't even know if y'all were around. Most of y'all were around 1986, but they had this thing called Comic Relief, and it would be this showcase of all these big comedians on stage performing, telling jokes for a cause. In this particular case, it was homelessness. Isn't it ironic here in 35 years later, we're still talking about homelessness? And in the worst regard, we're talking about homelessness. Not just homelessness, we're talking about displacement due to the current pandemic. So, that being said, I want to welcome anybody who's coming to the show for the first time. Thank you. Like I said, I appreciate you. Simple rules. Simple rules. I should just list the rules before you even come. But number one, we appreciate you for coming, like I said before. Number two, this is a platform, but it's not like that corny platform where it's like I just sit up here and I talk, and you don't get a chance to voice your opinion. That's not the idea of a shout out. A shout out in and of its entirety means that you have something to say, that you have something meaningful to add to the conversation, whether it's on the plus side or the negative side of a conversation, doesn't matter. The idea is that you have value. And I want to make sure that we get back to a point where we're dealing with value and volume in terms of how we carry this show forward. Okay? So if you're new to the show, I'm just giving you the game, as we say. I'm gonna give you some very clear game. And I'm gonna also give you some game at the end, but the one thing I also want you to know is don't be shy. Don't just sneak in here, peek around, look around. Just get in the comment section. Let somebody know other than yourself, hey, how you doing? Are you having a good day? Be concerned with more than you. That was the emphasis of watching Dick Gregory. He inspired me to remember, even as a comedian on stage where you have the microphone and the people may have paid to come see you. He said the goal is understanding that it's bigger than you. The audience is not there for your pleasure. You're there for the audience pleasure. And there's an issue of service. And he said this to me. He said there's an issue of service that you have to be able to understand before it gets to the fame, before it gets to the grandiosity. You have to understand that the person that comes to your show is the same person you have to be willing to talk to that can't come to the show. That's the person that's homeless. That's the person who's in the street. He said, and the quotient of humanity between them there's no difference. And so I just want to put that out there, brothers and sisters, because we have a tough topic today, addressing COVID and vaccinations. Before I get started, I want to give my shout outs. Sister Reed, thank you so much for coming on and assisting us in a sound check. I appreciate you. As always, I hope Auntie and Big Sis are doing well. I made that dua this morning. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Appreciate you too as well, Sultana, our consultant producer. Like I said, been lockstep with me since we first started this whole thing with the Shout Out Show. And I hope as we evolve and scale up that you will hang with me, because you are definitely a star. And that is the other thing. You have to be willing to engage in the people around you. I'm passionate about seeing you do well. I'm passionate about everybody here. I'm passionate about seeing you do well. So that's important. My main man, Altaf Rashid, my homie all the way from Canada, brother. You got me ready to get a red maple leaf and stomp it on my chest, brother. I appreciate you coming on, man. I don't know how you do it every day at 6, man, but I'm going to tell you something. I don't know how you do it, but I appreciate it. How about that? That's old school stuff. I don't know how you do it, but I appreciate it. And I thank you. And I just want to let you know it's not overlooked. We got Sister Sakina Mujahid coming all the way in from Charlotte. How you doing, sister? Sister Sakina is a social worker, putting in big work down there in Charlotte, trying to make a difference, holding down a family. I mean, she's doing a lot of great things down there. And the funny part is she was doing it up in Minneapolis, so it's funny how people take their passion, take the quotient of service and just move around, and they just continue to do good work. So shout out to you, Sister Sakina. We appreciate you. And Sister Reed said that both are doing well. Well, that means that du'as are working, everybody. Du'as are working. So our topic today is addressing COVID and vaccinations. when I say addressing COVID and vaccinations, I don't want it to be just this idea that you have an illness, number one, or a pandemic in this case, and you have a cure. First of all, a vaccination is not a cure. We understand that the vaccinations meant something to stem the tide and the effects of this particular pandemic, but it will not ultimately rule it out. Long story short, we should be prepared to have this pandemic around for quite a while. All we're looking at is how do we mitigate some of the effects of this pandemic moving forward in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. There'll be a time, 5 years, if we're still here, we go, oh, you guys remember back the pandemic, COVID? COVID will be like a cold because, alhamdulillah, everybody would have figured out what we need to do. But I want to lay a groundwork for you. And I don't do it often enough, so I apologize before I even start. I want to lay a groundwork for you. And I want to give you a name. Probably some of you know the name, some of you don't know the name. But it's one of our black pioneers in medicine. Of course, this black pioneer is one of my heroes because he comes from Washington, D.C. But that's not the only reason he's my hero. He's my hero because he expanded a thought process that saved thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. We still live with the benefits of his discovery and his medical and mental prowess moving forward. Many of you may have heard of him, you may not have heard of him, but for this conversation, I want to preface what I'm going to say about COVID and vaccinations. I want to look at COVID as a problem, and I want to look at vaccinations as an opportunity. COVID as a problem, vaccinations as an opportunity. The name I'm going to throw out there is Charles Drew, Dr. Charles Drew, who was born in Washington, D.C., middle-class family. Dr. Drew was one of the early medical pioneers. He went to school in Canada, Ottawa, McGill University. He got his medical licenses up there. Came back, did well. He worked at Howard University. Got to work at Howard. And did well. And he pioneered this whole idea of the blood bank. Like the mobile blood bank, which was really, really important during the Second World War, because they realized if they could get blood and plasma to injured soldiers, soldiers who were recuperating, that the chances for life, or let's just say surviving, were dramatically increased. So this guy was, an otherworldly guy. If you ever look at a plasma bag, that has Charles Drew written all over it. The idea that we could be mobile in getting blood distribution out. He pioneered it for the American Red Cross. He got all kinds of awards, brothers and sisters. He led all kinds of research. Everybody should look him up, Charles Drew, if you get a chance. But here's this thing about Charles Drew that always bothered me as a kid. It was the end of his life. The end of Charles Drew's life is here you have this fantastically successful surgeon. He's led groundbreaking research about the idea how you store blood, how you distribute blood. In North Carolina, he has an accident, a very serious accident, and basically a fatal accident. And he bleeds out. And what I was told as a child was he bled out because he wasn't allowed to go to the white hospital. They refused him because he was black. And now the play on this was when Charles Drew came up with this whole thing. Let me give a shout out. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, my brother Nayo, my classmate. How you doing, beloved? Now, the whole thing about Charles Drew and his blood plasma thing and the blood bank, the interesting thing was white people were allowed to donate their blood. Black people were not. And he was very vocal about that. Why can white people give their blood? Black people can't give their blood. It was a crazy time back then. Let's flash forward to the end. He's in a fatal car accident. He bleeds to death, essentially. The story was he bled out to death because he was denied service at the White Hospital. He was denied service. And for a number of years, I believed that. It burned in my heart. I was upset that a man of this genius would be denied. You hear what I'm saying? Being denied service because of the color of his skin. Now the killer part was, dude was he was light, bright, and damn near white. I'm like, these white people couldn't figure it out. Hell, I couldn't figure it out. But he died. And that was the myth. But the truth of the matter was, brothers and sisters, the truth of the matter was, his injuries were so extensive, he would have died on the spot anyway. A blood transfusion, they said, would have killed him sooner than what happened. He died because of his injuries. But for years, in our own community, what did we hear? Those white folks didn't give him treatment. Those white folks didn't give him treatment. Why am I saying this? I'm saying because we have the same situation and scenario going on with these vaccines. Now, somebody put out in the rumor the vaccines are not safe. I'm not going to say they are or they are not. I'm not going to say they're safe or they're not safe. What I'm going to say is it's all due process. We all have to, as a community, not a neighborhood, but a community, as Dick Gregory says. There's a difference between a community and a neighborhood. A neighborhood is high neighbor. A community controls the interest of the neighborhood. They set the agenda for the neighborhood. A community can tell you what kind of students they want to produce out of their schools, what kind of teachers we're going to have in there. It's a big difference. I'm saying we need to engage our medical community to sit down and have a talk with us about vaccinations. Because here's what's happening. In all the conversation about vaccinations, yes, no, disparaging, and we put a lot of stuff out there. You know what I mean? The Tuskegee syphilis experiment is real, brothers and sisters. It's real. That's it. But this myth about Charles Drew wasn't real. And even now that I bring it up right now, there's still people who believe that that's what happened. And believing that's what happened, brothers and sisters, has limited us and cut us off from things that may be life-saving. You see the vaccination, brothers and sisters, we're not lining up. They're talking about Latinos and black people are not lining up for the vaccination. And it's hard to convince us to go get the vaccinations. But here's the real talk. Access to vaccinations has been much more readily available to white populations, to white communities. I wonder why that is. I wonder why they have so many vaccinations. Because there's a perceived idea that if someone would give us the vaccinations, we would not use them. You hear what I'm saying? If they gave us the vaccinations, we would not use them. Somehow we don't have the intellectual and educational capacity to do our own studies. Therefore, in somebody's mind, it's like, why give it to them anyway? Therein lies the problem. There's a myth. Just like Charles Drew's death, we now have a myth around vaccinations. We're a year into COVID, brothers and sisters. Essentially a year into COVID. And here's the thing about COVID right now, brothers and sisters. In most regards, COVID has not changed. It has not changed. What has been flippant about COVID is our behavior around COVID. Our understanding and commitment to healthy practices for ourselves, for our family, for others, for progress, for hope, for common sense. We still have situations and scenarios where people now flaunt, after so many deaths, they flaunt COVID. I recently had to go get a haircut, and I arrived early before my barber got there. What I saw appalled me. No one in the barbershop was wearing a mask. No one in the barbershop was wearing a mask. And my barber came in, and he limped in, and he has diabetes. And I said, my brother, why are you not wearing a mask? COVID is out there. You have diabetes. I ain't worried about that. Of course, I wanted to reach up and choke him. But I asked him why. And what he said kind of shocked me, but it didn't shock me. It kind of expanded a little bit of what everybody's going through. It's just this fatigue, brothers and sisters. People have a fatigue now. And what it's called is, I call it expectation fatigue. I call it expectation fatigue. Because people have been expecting something, expecting something, expecting something, expecting something. They haven't gotten it, or they haven't gotten it in the way and fashion that they wanted. Therefore, now it merits less hope, it merits less discipline, it merits less execution. If we were to all take this attitude, brothers and sisters, then all of us should be damned as hypocrites and fools for pointing the finger at the Capitol revolt. People making poor decisions wrapped around the idea that I'm right. Do you hear what I'm saying? I can make a poor decision, but it's okay because I'm right. And we're not right. We're as wrong as wrong could be. But the greater problem, brothers and sisters, the greater problem is that we create a culture of people who are wrong, but it's okay because they think they're right. Irregardless of the facts, irregardless of the data, irregardless of the truth. Do you know how hard it is to talk to somebody that has absolutely no value of the truth? Satan, Shaitan, on his worst day, I give him credit because while he lies to you, he understands that there's still a truth. There's still a truth. And what we see now is worse than that. People don't recognize that there's even a truth. They have substituted truth, being truthful, for being right. And so as we get to talk about COVID, there's a revisiting that I want us to have. That revisiting was a healthy fear of everybody putting on a mask, of people standing 6 and 8 feet away from each other, of washing hands, of washing our groceries. I want to say a gross over-exaggeration of hygienic practices. You know why it was important? Because it worked. I once put a graph up on this show, and the graph showed a breakdown of COVID victims. The people who got COVID victims, this broke down on racial identity, Latino and Black. Latino and Black COVID exposure was this high. White exposure was small. It was a small sample, but it was small, brothers and sisters. And even places where they had high exposure to COVID, now they're talking about, being one of the states that no longer have high COVID. Why do you think that happens? North Dakota was a hotbed for COVID. Now in the state of North Dakota, they've lifted the mask rule. They have indoor dining. They have all this stuff. Schools are open. And I applaud it, but I'm like, but why can't that happen in Atlanta? Why can't that happen in the hood in Chicago? Why can't that happen in the hood of D.C.? Because, brothers and sisters, we're stuck on this myth. And that myth is this. Much the same as Charles Drew. The myth is we won't go out and search for the truth on our own. Does that make sense? One of the most disheartening things about the Tuskegee syphilis experiment is, if not for an administrative snafu, that's an experiment that went over 40 years. It could potentially still be going because people don't know. So I'm going to say something that Dick Gregory said to me years ago. He said, you Negroes and Bammers need to get in the information business. See, that's a good thing about doing stand-up. Stand-up automatically puts you in the information business. Muslim stand-up puts you in the real information business, but it puts you in the truth business. One of the caveats of being a Muslim comedian is, yes, you can tell jokes and people could laugh, but you cannot intentionally mislead the people. You can't intentionally mislead the people. I can't look you in your eye and lie, hoping to get a reaction out of you. I can speak in metaphors and puns and things like that, but it comes with the space that I'm telling you, this is not true. This is a potential thing that could happen. This is a scenario I thought of, not one that happened. Much the same as Charles Drew's death, that was a myth that played out as something that happened. We cannot be in that business anymore, brothers and sisters. We can't. There's a level of desperation out there, and I just realized what the level of desperation is founded in. It's founded in the fact that people don't know. People don't know. It's not an educational deficit that we're talking about, a financial deficit. It's the idea that finally something came down the road, had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with how much education you had nothing to do with where you live or how much money you had or what religion you were. It had to do with the fact that we all shared a balance in the unknown, the uncertain. And while we have 4 years of inactivity and a massive amount of deaths, it's shameful, brothers and sisters. It's shameful. You know, my teacher Dick Gregory said, when it's shameful, say it's shameful. It's shameful and criminal the amount of people who have passed away. They said that the United States is just a portion of the world population. However, we have the majority of COVID infections and deaths. Statistics I looked at said, at the most, if we had handled our business, at the most, the United States should have had about 80 to 90,000 deaths, not 420 some plus deaths. So my point is, brothers and sisters, okay, all right, because some of you are going to preach, where we're going to go with this. I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go with this. Let's say from now to next year, we get into the information business. Let's say that I dedicate a portion of my show where we're going to have fun, we're going to have laughs, but a portion of the show, we're just going to call it The Real. And The Real is going to be where we talk about these issues that really, really are affecting us as a community, not a neighborhood, as a community. And this thing moves to be a community forum. Yes, it's led by a comedian, but it's a community forum. And we bring in all of our communities, brothers and sisters. Maybe we even expand the time. We don't go from 5 to 5:30. We go from 5 to 6. And we expand the time to be able to have these discussions to make sure that there are no more myths like Charles Drew. One of the things I felt always as a child and as an adult with Mr. Drew is that myth overshadowed the giant this man was in terms of being a medical professional. It overshadowed all the things he did. The first, he was the first athletic director at Morgan State University. He taught school there to go to McGill. I mean, this guy was a giant. But what do we talk about when we talk about Charles Drew? The byline is the myth. So, I'm going to ask and I'm going to implore all of us to let's get out of the myth business. Let's get in the information business. Let's start asking the tough questions. And you know it's a tough question when you make other people uncomfortable. So let's get into the uncomfortable information business. Because we need answers. And I don't mean answers for what's happening. We need answers in the aspect that we begin to understand how we ask better questions, how we frame better inquiry. Because at this point in time, a year after COVID, 400-some thousand people lives have lost changes. We're talking about generational change behind a pandemic, and nobody's blinking. And the people in charge, and I won't let them off the hook, the people in charge who've always told us that we weren't smart enough, who've always told us that we didn't have the capacity to learn, who've always told us that you need to stay in your place, who've always told us that, you know what, I know you don't know, who've always told us that God told me, didn't tell you. We need you people to be accountable. Politics, brothers and sisters, is not the answer to get rid of COVID. It is a community response. Let me tell you what politics is, and I'm going to get out of here. But politics, brothers and sisters, is not policing. It's not producing policies. It is being part of a social club. Part of a social club, meaning that to be a part of this club, you have to say certain things, you have to do certain things to maintain your membership, to maintain your status. You can't come in bright-eyed and bushy-tailed thinking you're going to change a system that's been in place for years and years and years. However, I'm going to offer this, that us in the entertainment business and us in the information business change the paradigm. You know, the beautiful part about being a comedian is no politicians really want to argue with comedians. I learned this when I was doing Allah Made Me Funny and we talked about Islamophobia. A young man tried to come at me about Islamophobia and I shredded him. And I'm not going to be shy. I love shredding him. I knew what he was going to say. I'll cut that boy every which way but right. But what he walked away from was, at least in this situation, that hustle doesn't work. That language doesn't work. And we have to get into a scenario whereby we say, hey, listen, politicians. Hey, QAnon, or hey, Proud Boys, or hey, politicians, hey, Democrats, Republicans, GOP, whatever. What you've been telling us is a myth and it doesn't work. Let me present you with the truth, make a compelling argument, and if you can't handle that truth, the community will have a response for you. All right, brothers and sisters, I got a quick note, and then I want to shout out our sponsor real quick, and then we'll be out of here, okay? Hold on a moment. And our sponsor today is, of course, Be Financially Independent. BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Increase and grow your income in financial services. We're going to have Sister Maxine Cade on either the end of this week or next week, inshallah. We're going to have her talking about financial advising and understanding the importance of financial independence in a pandemic, meaning that there is a certain quotient, and she's going to talk about it on several levels. Of course, there's a financial level, there's emotional level, but there's also the religious level. The scope that we do in our own spaces deserve to have, brothers and sisters. We need to have accountability for what we're doing. We need to be able to tell people, especially ourselves and our loved ones, that despite everything that's going on, you still have a fiduciary responsibility to lead the way for financial independence. Miss Maxine Cade is better known as the Harriet Tubman of financial freedom. She's trying to lead all of us out of debt. So we're going to have her here. And, brothers and sisters, I want you to take to heart what I said today. Go to our website, BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. That phone number, let me move my banner. Oh, my goodness. Let me move that banner for you, brothers and sisters. That number is 1-800-679-3175. Again, that's 1-800-679-3175. Give her a call. Start your trail and start your quest for financial freedom. Okay, I have to pull out of here. You guys have been amazing, but let's think about some of this stuff. Tomorrow's Throwback Thursday. We're going to have a lighter show, brothers and sisters, but, in the words of Mr. Dick Gregory, my brother, he said sometimes you got to tell people the truth, because sometimes the truth won't find their way. There are too many things in the way of getting to the truth. So today was one of those episodes, and I want to thank everybody for coming on the show, but I want to give a heartfelt thank you and appreciation to my comedy dad, my comedy teacher, Mr. Dick Gregory. We miss you and we appreciate you. See you guys tomorrow on the Shout Out Show, inshallah. I'm Preacher Moss. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your Shout Out Show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next Shout Out Show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarifatar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out Tarifatar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.